This is going so fast. We're a little bit worried about the electricity in the early spring, but I think we got a handle on it. A little bit of a progression through Lodi High School. This is view looking south, and these are former portable classrooms. A view looking east. And there's the old M&O, some of the old M&O structures, and a view looking a little southeast. Excuse me, same picture. A view looking southeast, where the M&O building used to be, is a little bit in the right-hand side, so we can't see this. This is looking at the greenhouse ag facilities to the right, to the left. But this is what became of the old parking lot and the M&O structure. Creekside's parking lot, I know Mr. Knackstead went out and visited with the contractor out there. And the extension road drop off, I think you can see the fire access road back here. And just to give you an idea of what some of these places look like. Let me see if this is a picture. This is what Extension Road looked like before the work was done. So quite a bit of work has been completed. I'll review all of the last 15 months or so. If I can I'll get rid of these pictures and go straight into the executive summary. All right, so again, the board's projects are proceeding very nicely. Since June of last year, the M&O facility is completed. Staff is completely moved in. We still have a couple of items that we are holding retention against, but we had a very good relationship with the contractor there, and we expect those to be resolved soon. Release money. We discussed this at the last board meeting with the notice of completion on the M&O building. While the contractor's contract did go up by about $268,000, this was to roughly 11 million, just under 11 million 7. This in its entirety was a $14.2 million project. We do expect there to be 100,000, maybe 200,000 left once we're finally complete and have released all monies and closed out the resource management code. 8 fire alarms have been completed under Measure U. 9 paving projects, that includes the Creekside project, which was a combination of Measure U, Measure L, and Fund 40. Lodi, Tokay, and Needham, we are almost out of the dirt, as they say, which is a very good thing. Digging up dirt, trenching out conduit water and electricity lines usually is where you encounter most of your problems with soil, unforeseen conditions. So it's always a good thing to get out of dirt. I will remind the board that in each of these 3 projects, there are multiple increments. The one we refer to as increment 1 is the ground and underground soil, and then the substrates, and then the pads. The increment 1 contractors are almost completely done at these sites in this phase. However, once the buildings are completed and released to the board for occupancy, those contractors will come back and begin demo and start hauling off old portables. I'm proud to say that at our Campo Road site, the contractor will be off site tomorrow, which is about 27 days past due. But fortunately, I won't say fortunately, but the distance learning program gave us a little bit of luck on the construction side. So brand new air conditioners in 15 of the classrooms, staff bathroom renovation, and 4 student bathroom renovations. Also, there's a shade structure going up right now, but that's a different contractor. The building contractors are on site at Lodi High and Tokay. So things are moving quickly. We are in the final stages of DSA back check. That is where DSA submits questions to our architect for response. We could have a guaranteed maximum price or GMP in 6 weeks' time. We do expect the building contractors to be on site in October at Needham. So in a nutshell, with Lodi, Tokay, and Needham, this gives us at least a window of release for occupancy somewhere around October of next year to December of next year. So things are moving quickly. We've accomplished 13 public address, intercom, and VoIP transmissions. We've got one more remaining under the bond, that is Washington. We've accomplished 2 demolitions under the bond, that's Elkhorn and Needham. We're preparing 4 of the final paving projects for summer of 2021. That's Bear Creek, Delta Sierra, John Muir, and Larson. We do have 1 fire alarm project we will be working on next summer. Well, possibly next summer. It might begin in the summer, extend into the fall. That's Beckman, but we're also considering possibly the Washington fire alarm project. The Lodi High School pool and their locker room facility is in DSA right now. So we're expecting a 2 to 3 month period in DSA, but we'll report on that later. Costs are going up substantially. We will be requesting additional money for increases in scope at the 3 big projects, but there are also substantial unforeseens and electrical, natural gas, and water reroutes on all of these projects. The board may recall around this time last year, we began working the electrical reroutes at Needham. Also, the board, I'm sure will remember that it's already accepted the contract amounts for MELIS at Lodi High and MELIS and JLC construction at Tokay. It's sort of a big number to fathom, but including all the site improvements, all of the service improvements, all of the added work, the things like the courtyards in both Tokay, Lodi, Needham. All these things are panning out somewhere around $1 million a classroom at each of our sites, all in. So for Tokay, the final cost or the GMPs presented were $47 million for the buildings and 14 to 18 million for the site work in the underground. Both of those prices include a 5% district-owned allowance. However, those $2 amounts are actually well above the 61 million that was originally allocated to that site in the implementation plan. That said, thus far, between all the projects completed thus far, the big savings, of course, being the M&O project, staff is estimating about 16 million in total project savings versus the implementation plan. And I'll give you a demonstration of this just in a second, but including all known costs, some of the costs I'm about to show you were pulled from our FAR 110 report out of the district's accounting system. So some of those numbers may change in the near future, owing to the fact that some of staff hasn't had time to actually input all of the cost in the system. But as we are this deep into the bond, with as many projects as the board has completed thus far, and with the stage we're at with the 3 big projects, Lodi, Tokay, and Needham, what we believe, the position we believe the board is in right now is there's roughly $64 million worth of projects remaining with roughly 80 million in bond capacity left. So that's at least a visual surplus of almost 20%. But please bear in mind that we are both seeing cost increases at the construction level. Anybody that's paying attention to commodities right now is seeing lumber and copper hit unbelievably historic highs. A lot of this might, if I were to handicap, I'd say it's has probably a lot more to do with the fact that the Federal Reserve is pushing negative real interest rates in the economy, and any asset that's for sale gets bought up and held for right now. So I think that plays a lot into it. There is tightness in the construction markets as well, but we're also seeing it in our professional consultants. As we start entering into discussions for the next wave of projects, it just anecdotally it seems like every architect, construction manager, mechanical, electrical, or plumbing engineer, civil engineer, inspector, or a geotech consultant all want another 20% versus where their bills were through these projects thus far. So I'll give the board a demonstration of what I meant by these costs with the remaining dollar amounts. So right now, with the cost included in this spreadsheet, this is every single one of our school sites that receive Measure U allocations. The number to watch is the blue number here, the 46.766 million. But with Lodi High, we will be requesting an additional 14 million. Our current calculation is about 13.5 million over budget. But if we enter 14 million here, that takes the board's remaining surplus down to 32.7 million. If we move down to Needham, we'll put 8 million in here, but please recall we don't have the guaranteed maximum price for Needham yet, but we'll take the board surplus down to about 32 million, or excuse me, 24 million. And then if we add 10 million for Tokay High, although the present calculation, excuse me, I left Tokay's number in there. So with the Needham number, the board surplus is 34 million. If we put Tokay High's extra allocation needed at 10 million, takes the board to 24.76 million. Okay, that does not include our 0900 account. The board may recall that this is money that once we're done with a project, if there's money left, we move it into this account so that the board can keep track of the ins and outs. There's presently 8,500,565 in this, and that will be a negative. That takes, I got a math issue. Excuse me. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Sorry, I don't know why it's all my Zooms are grayed out. Can you? So this is great. Oh, it's back up. that better? More? Okay. Okay, so after the 14 million, 8 million, 14 million for Lodi High, 8 million for Needham, 10 million for Tokay, and please recall our current calculations for Tokay right now indicates a need of about 7.8, but we still have some things to calculate. But if we deduct from that this savings that we've accrued in the other projects, the board's left with no, yes, 25 million. And then if we add another 9 million to the Tokay High pool, puts the board almost at 16 million worth of surplus. All righty, and we still feel that we can get through the remaining projects and finish out everything on your implementation plan. That's if costs stay reasonable. I think we'll discuss at the end of the executive summary the next projects and some ideas, but the staff is going to request some board participation in how we roll those out and what we allocate to them. Also, bear in mind it won't offset a tremendous amount of cost, but if we do end up with an extra classroom or so at each of these sites, Lodi, probably not Needham, I don't think, but Lodi and Tokay, we may be able to use Fund 25 money, the developer fee, to pay for that. So at roughly $1 million a classroom, it adds to your surplus. Okay. About 16, it's probably closer to 18 million now. So are there any questions about the Measure U projects that are either ongoing or completed, or any of the budgetary?
Mr. Heberly, any questions? Mr. Freitas?
We're almost out of money, but the board still has 80 million in capacity. So current cash is close to being either expended or encumbered for current projects. But you do have another $80 million worth of building capacity.
So we have another $80 million
Yes, sir.
of bonds that we could sell.
Yes, sir.
And we haven't even touched that yet.
Not yet.
And that's the second part of this presentation, how we're going to touch that.
Not yet. Well, that's not part of the presentation. What the last thing I'd like to discuss are the next 7 modernization projects. We have a recommendation initially, but even before staff gets to that point, I think it'd be wise to include board input in our discussions with the sites, and also in terms of maybe adding a little bit of scope to those projects as well. To just give you a little bit of front loading on that, each of 4 projects at the moment, that'd be Lodi Middle, Vinewood, Lakewood, and who am I leaving out? Lodi and Davis. So Davis, Vinewood, Lakewood, and Lodi Middle all are going to require interim housing. At Lodi High, part of the overage in cost is we're going to have better than $2 million expended after all is said and done on 10 interim housing units and 1 interim restroom that's right behind the greenhouse that we showed earlier. It's a little disheartening. That was one of the real pieces of magic that staff pulled off in this build. And those classrooms were locked in and ready on March 6th. And nobody's been back to school since. So I know there's no way we could have not done it. But from a CBO's perspective, interim housing is just a massive expenditure of cash for a short period of usability. So each of the 4 sites just mentioned, Davis, Vinewood, Lakewood, and Lodi Middle, are going to require interim housing. One thought staff will bring forward is, why not buy each of those sites a brand new 4-track of modular buildings? When those are done, especially some of the schools are perfect for this, like Davis, the finger kind of setup. Just take 4 classrooms and put them in the new one. Go renovate the 4. Move the next 4 into those. Renovate these. So they're all going to be long-term projects, just because we can't shut the whole school down for the time it'll take. So we're going to need to be flipping staff and kids into new classrooms as we go. But that's just a generic idea that staff has. Clearly, we'd be more comfortable if board had input on those discussions as well. Okay.
Thank you. Mr. Knapsack, any questions for Mr. Khan?
No, thank you.
Okay, Mr. Neely?
Thank you, Mr. Nava. Mr. Khan, just a quick thank you for this. Getting that Lodi pool on there has been something we've been working on for ever since measure you passed. So you got it on there. Thank you very much. I really appreciate that. That's all I got.
Sure.
Thank you, George. Ms. McFarland?
No questions, but I want to thank you. I can't imagine trying to pull this off in addition to COVID and everything else you've been doing. So if we don't say thank you enough, thank you to everybody that helped you. I appreciate the.
It's a tremendous team.
Mr. Porter? You're good, okay. And I'm good. The only question I have, what are the subcommittees that we have for Measure U and Measure L? Are they involved with this?
The board has already approved everything we've done in Resolution 2018-08. That was February 20th, 2018 board meeting. So we took the entire implementation plan that the board's architect prepared, and the board passed all those as viable projects.
Perfect.
So we could proceed in lockstep, but we really think there's, especially with the types of projects we've just mentioned, the elementaries and the Lodi Middle, there may be a better way to proceed, a more efficient way. It'll be more expensive, but in the end, the board would be left with at least a portion of permanent housing versus all the portables, and it probably end up costing less after all the interim housing and the hullabaloo is involved. So I will advise, it didn't make it into this board item, but there are also a lot of what we've always viewed, what staff has always viewed as deferred maintenance type projects. So a good example would be Project 1B2, which is a repair of cracked brick walls and masonry walls, internal walls. That, if I remember correctly, about 9 or 10 sites have a 1B2 project allocated to them in the implementation plan. We had a meeting yesterday, and we will begin moving forward with those projects. They're all smaller projects, but there's no reason to halt their progress while we're working through Lodi, Tokay, and Needham and discussing the next round of modernizations. Yesterday, staff also committed to an HVAC meeting next week. So we'll continue proceeding with HVACs. We may have some lighting projects to discuss with the board, and we actually may have some alternative financing arrangements for the lighting, which would preserve more bond as well. So we'll have a lot more to discuss in the near future. Okay. Yeah.
Extra letter for job well done. I know those cracks in the classrooms right now, it's time to do it.
Yeah.
without any kids involved in there.
Um,
So that's my recommendation there. It has to do with the safety of the buildings and so forth. So
Right.
that's one. Mr. Heberly.
Yeah. Unmute. There we go. Um, for those exterior and interior walls,
Mhm.
would that fall under one of the measures, or would that fall under
It's,
Fund 40 or routine maintenance?
it's all, well, they're technically routine maintenance
Okay.
projects, but they are also included in your Measure U bond for several sites.
Oh, okay.
So that's an option too, is to just have the district's 8150 assume those projects and costs. The board will, I'm sure, recalls that 8150 is restricted money. It can only be used for routine restricted maintenance. It is equal to 3% a year. When you look at your financial statements, you see massive contribution. We too often think, well, there's a special ed cost, but 3% of all your contribution is routine restricted maintenance, and it has to be spent on that. It can be spent also on the staff, the 2000 and 3000 object codes that perform routine maintenance for the board. But it can't be spent on books and supplies and things like that. It has to be spent on maintaining the buildings. So that's also a viable option as well. It just a back of the envelope calculation, there might be $2 million worth of 8150 that would be available for that type of work. And given the type of work, that would be a lot of money for.
How about when we're talking lighting, would that fall under the energy proposition? money?
Except we've already spent all that money. So I think we've replaced lights and well over 100 HVAC. I'm sure the board has heard a lot less about HVACs in the past 2 years. Part of that's because of the testing that M&O staff is doing, but no small part, a portion of the functionality of the board's HVACs is because they're brand new as well. So, already.
Thank you, Michelle.
Okay.
Any public comments, Michelle?
Yes, Michelle Oregon.
All right. You put her on, please.
Good evening, President Nava, members of the board. If it's okay through President Nava, on the mention of the HVAC systems, are we looking at different filtration systems and, excuse my mispronunciation, but maybe the MERV filters, and making sure that as we go forward, we're looking at the filtration rate being better as we go on?
President.
Con-
At this point, there's no plan to move filtration to the HEPA level of filtration. This is filtration that's typically found in surgical theaters. There is certainly evidence that microbe like the COVID virus can pass through even HEPA filters, even though they're probably more effective than the filters we use, which the filters the board currently uses are the highest grade, highest filtration of commercially used filters, not surgical theater or infectious disease lab filters. So if there is some fear of contamination or contagion through the ventilation system, professional recommendations are that filtration is an option, but that can occur in one of two ways, either by moving your entire system to HEPA or by simply having staff who may be affected or concerned wear N95 masks. The issue with moving the entire site or the entire district to a higher rated filter like a HEPA filter would mean tens of millions of dollars of retrofits on existing HVAC. And without those retrofits, and which would all in likelihood mean changing out the units for more forced air, we could incapacitate the city because the HEPA filters could actually block flow and increase the exertion on the machines.
Mr. Khan, Michelle, you're still on?
Thank you. With regards to the lighting, I know that several years ago, we went through to reduce lighting. I believe the reduction was 25% in most classrooms. Some of the classrooms have less lights than other classrooms. Is there a way to make sure there is a certain amount of looms per classroom as we go forward and look at changing any fixtures? Do we have a standard as to what's best for that?
LED is the, Mr. Nova? LED is the standard now. It's the most energy efficient and the brightest light or incandescence. Honestly, that's about the extent of my expertise on lighting. But as we get into those projects, we'll learn more from our design teams and our professional consultants. We will have a partner in lighting with PG&E in North Stockton. We will certainly reach out to City of Lodi as well to see what can be done there. But the providers of electricity are very good resources in terms of the types of things that should go into various types of enterprises.
Okay, and as I think it was, I'm sorry, a board member mentioned the Measure U and Measure L committees meeting to go over these things. How often do they meet to go over these? Is it quarterly?
The bond oversight committees?
Yes.
It's supposed to be quarterly. We were waylaid a little bit in the spring, and we've had membership issues on Measure L. We do have the next set of meetings scheduled for mid-September, though. And would love
Okay.
to see you there again, Michelle, as you've been the only public attendee in any Measure Oversight Committee I've ever been a part of.
Well, gosh, what recognition. I would, thanks, Mr. Khan. The Needham, excuse me, the Lodi High pool changes. The community is happy to see that. And as we look at updates, having the updates as the construction goes forward, the website's a little better to track and follow. So thank you for those changes. Of course, going forward, so the executive summary down at the bottom with regards to, I can't, let's see if I can shrink it. On the bottom of the, I'm sorry. There was one question on the very bottom, and I can't see or get out of this full screen. Is it possible for the person controlling it to scroll down to the bottom of the executive summary?
I'm at the very bottom right now.
Okay, thank you. Does the toxic substance control in West Lakes, can you just clarify, is that the property that is behind Rayleigh's?
No, Mr. Nava, are you okay if I go to this section? The Site I property is the property that's west of the I-5. It's just southwest of the Manlio Silva site. It's called the West Lakes Development. There are 2,200 homes scheduled for that particular piece of dirt.
Okay, thank you. I didn't have West Lakes written anywhere else. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Nava.
Thank you, Michelle. Any other comments from the public, Michelle?
No further comments.
No further comments. Okay, Mr. Khan, proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Nava, members of the board, Dr. Washer. We're starting to find, I won't refer to them as, I'll refer to them as financial surprises. So we were working on 4 lunch shelter projects, which were supposed to occur this summer. So that would be Washington, Henderson, Murata, and Heritage. Washington presented the largest hurdles in that there are rules to lunch shelters. DSA has rules. So if you put a lunch shelter within 20 feet of a building, it is now a building. So it needs electricity, it needs fire sprinklers, it needs fire alarms, it needs all the ADA upgrades. So we had consultants walk with both the facilities and M&O staff and with the site, and the only place we could have put it is on the very north side of Washington's campus, nowhere near the kitchen, which sort of defeats the purpose of a lunch shelter. We did talk with Miss Peterson. She's more than happy. She did meet with Mr. Faith, the retired principal from Washington, and the Measure U committee staff. They are more than happy to give up the lunch shelter in exchange for automatic swinging doors at their site, which I think they have 4 sets of the big, almost hospital-like swinging doors. And the board may recall that is a site where the board serves a large number of low incidence students who need that kind of doorway. The site would very much love an electric door, all electric doors. This cannot be a Measure U project, but we can fund it elsewhere with district money, and we can provide that with them. So if the board's happy with that result, we'll proceed. Also, the other 3 that we looked at, you can just see the actual estimated cost of these versus the implementation plan budgets. These costs are all due to triggering ADA upgrades and bathroom upgrades. So with every lunch shelter, you get 2 bathroom renovations and a lot of ramp and concrete renovations. This type of escalation in cost will put other projects at risk. These are, you've got arguably less than $600,000 worth of lunch shelters that are now going to be $1.5 million. And it's very difficult for staff to recommend proceeding with these specifically at this time. If we can ever fold these projects into additional site upgrades that may be required for something else, in theory, we're sort of reducing the surface cost of the lunch shelter as we're doing it now.
Leonard, is this under compliance on the ADA? Is it a necessary thing?
Yes, sir. This DSA will not let the lunch shelters go in unless you do the upgrades.
Okay.
So now that said, if the board were to deem that the lunch shelters were necessary, and I will tell the board, not doing the lunch shelters will impact Don Alberto at Heritage immensely. That is, we're a little bit, I don't want to say fortunate, because the decline in elementary school enrollment may ease the issue that site faces at feeding kids during the lunch or the feeding periods. But Heritage is deeply impacted and needing of outside lunch facilities. Currently, we use pop-ups and picnic tables for them. So if the board does deem these to be essential projects, it will not be a great financial thing for the state of the bond, but it's not as though the board wouldn't be getting value in terms of ADA upgrades at the sites as well.
Thank you, Mr. Khan. Any questions from the board, Mr. Eberly?
So are you looking for some kind of consensus or direction from the board regarding the shelters?
In the manner of moving these projects forward to a later date, yes, sir.
Okay,
Not eliminating them.
right. So if we move them to a later date, that would be closer to the finish of the bond, which might be 2 years, 4 years out.
A maximum of 4 years at the rate we're
Yeah.
going, yes, sir.
Okay. But then at that time, they would still have them. They would potentially still get them.
Yes, yes, sir.
The only one I'm not really that familiar with Murata Middle School. I'm trying to, I understand, I've got most of the wings in my head of how they're configured, but Heritage, I have a real good view in my head as to
Mhm.
where the multipurpose room, cafeteria, kitchen, and outside space. And I think that one seems, it seems easier to accomplish.
Yeah.
But okay.
There's a natural resting spot for that.
Yeah.
Henderson, the only, given the board's work with LPA and the schematic design, Mr. Heverly, you attended some of those meetings.
Yeah.
So there are potential future sites or buildings at the Extension Road campus. Given where the architect has placed those potential buildings, the only location for the lunch shelters, Henderson, is right up against the fence line on Extension Road. So,
Oh, wow.
so maybe if that one waits for a future date, maybe there will be more clarity in terms of what that site might look like in the years to come.
Thank you, Mr. Nava.
Thank you, Mr. Neely. George,
Yep, I have no questions. Thank you.
no questions. Mr. Knapsack?
I don't have any questions here. Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Porter?
I want to thank Mr. Khan for a very detailed and thorough.
Awesome. Awesome. Thank you, Mr. Porter. Ms. McFarland?
Thank you. No questions other than if we do table these and put them off a bit, I'm just concerned that we're putting off something as the costs are rising. Is it better to move them forward knowing we have a better understanding of cost versus pushing off 4 years? I mean, you would know better than.
Well, I won't claim to know, but if the board's asking my opinion, the trees are growing to the sky. It's probably not the most ideal time to be embarking on projects. And the
Okay.
board can sort of rest on its laurels at this moment because you've got plenty of stuff going on right now. There is a lot of work being done on your school sites. So if it takes a while to get to these, it's hard for me to see how the investing world, whether it's a house, a school, any type of project, can make a value investment in a project with lumber at $800 per 1,000 linear feet. You know, I know that some of our contractors actually purchased their lumber 2 years ago. So the board has benefit of that. That won't be the case as we go into the next modernization project. So I would counsel superintendent board that you have time to sort of not stall, but maybe slow in your planning of your next actual building projects.
Thank you, Mr. Khan. Mr. Freitas?
Speaking of what's next, Mr. Khan, I think all of our board members in Lodi probably share the same concerns that I have, and that is what it's looking like. I see about 200 new homes, I think, going into Lodi every single year, which would be 2,000 new homes in the next 10 years. Generally, that works out to about a third of those homes will be adding kids to our district. So we must be looking at in the neighborhood of 600 or 700 new kids in Lodi alone that's going in the area. And the schools that we have on the south and the west side are already at full capacity. My school is Larson. Other members have Beckman. Parents have already told us that they don't want to go to Live Oak. They don't want to bus over 99, and that they definitely don't want to go to Stockton.
Mhm.
So what is staff's solution for what this looks like? And also factoring into the component that the next, both of our middle schools in Lodi are at capacity also. So those 600 kids are also going to need a middle school for them to go there. So are we going to have capacity with the Measure U bonds to do this? Or are we looking at another bond issue? Or do we have reserves to do that? And what is staff's plan for these kids, and how are we going to serve our family and our stakeholders?
Okay, so presently we're tracking 5,000 planned units in the city of Lodi. And 5,162. And of those 5,162 approved in the master plan, we understand that 1,021 are either in construction or the permits have been pulled on those. In city of Stockton, we're tracking 1,922 units, clearly in our boundaries, not the entire city of Stockton. And I'm sorry, I don't have the number under construction and permits pulled on this yet, but another item on this is the West Lakes property. We plan to make that part of that presentation when we're ready to recommend negotiating with the seller of that piece of property. To answer the question about the bonds and Measure L, you do have ability, if the board approves a 10 million sale, when we bring that item as an action item, you'll have $30 million worth of capacity left in the Measure L bond and roughly 18 million in Fund 25 money. That might buy you a middle school. It would definitely build you an elementary school. I think the board's aware, staff is continually advised that the board should consider a larger couple of tracks in its property inventory. We would recommend on the west side, and then possibly maybe look a little south or southwest in both city areas. The West Lakes property happens to be in the southwest, and it's smack dab in the middle of 2,200 acres. I think you have time in city of Lodi, but it is moving south and west. In city of Lodi as well. So unfortunately, the Measure U bond does not allow for any expenditure on any new construction. So it would have to be a new bond to build a school.
Okay, Mr. Khan, you finished, sir?
Well,
I'm sorry.
I see. Thank you. I do see this of primary importance, that we do find a way to make this happen. I see Lodi is growing. I see it growing on the south and the west side. It's very obvious that we're going to have a demand, and we're going to be in quite a position if we don't take steps in preparation of that. Other than that, I would join my colleagues. I can't thank you and your staff enough for this very thorough report and all the information that you presented here tonight. And I'm very, very excited to see these events, these projects continue going in the way that they've been going. Thank you, sir.
You, Michelle, any public comments?
Michelle Oregon.
Put her on, please.
Thank you. For no comments for this section that haven't already been addressed. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Khan.
Thank you, President Nava, members of the board, Dr. Washer. I'll move quickly through the Measure U status. There were 3 paving projects completed, and one of those 3 was the co-funded Creekside project, 3 fire alarm projects completed. I say that with a little bit of tongue in cheek. The inspector at Bear Creek, which is already a 1.6+ million fire alarm project, has found another 10,000 to 40. We thought we were finished, and he has found another $10,000 to $40,000 worth of work to do. If I never have to do a fire alarm again, I will celebrate the day. Fire alarm codes change every 2 years. So if you wait 3 years or 4 years to redo a fire alarm, you got to go back and redo all those code improvements. We are adding more sensors than I've ever seen in places that I've never seen sensors that require people to crawl up into attics and add. So stay tuned on that one. We can't wait to get out of Bear Creek's fire alarm project, but we're close. Future projects, really just 2 items. The Bear Creek High School Ag Grant, board's aware of that. We'll need another $2.5 million. Well, let me finish up. The board's also completed 19 public address intercom and voice over IP transitions. So better than 70% of your school sites, district office, and departments have been converted to the voice over IP telephone, public address, and intercom system. So the board may have noticed also that in the last well, at least in the last year, you haven't heard about any intercoms or telephone systems going down like Vinewood, Lodi Middle, Lakewood, Tokay High School, Park Lane. So a lot's been done on that side. The 2 projects envisioned under Measure L currently are the Bear Creek Ag Grant match. That's the we're in good running right now. We're in the final stages of finding out whether or not we get matches from CDE on an ag facility at Bear Creek. We will have to match. We're expecting the match to be about 2.5 million, might be slightly more, but we've targeted Measure L for that. The other one is probably more of a difficult conversation. There's a storm pump that needs to be built just northwest of McNair High School, across McNair Way, right in the levee. We currently have a temporary pump there, and the district provided that pump as part of the transition into McNair's property. That pump only has capacity to protect the buildings on our land, and it is a temporary pump, so it's not ideal by any means. City of Stockton is proceeding with its library on the corner of West Lane and Murata Lane. We've been called into meetings, and City of Stockton has told us you will build the permanent pump now. That's expected to cost $3.5 to $4.5 million. We at one point, when I first arrived in the district, were told, and I understood that the district was 100% responsible for the cost of that pump as the developer of McNair High School. The board's civil engineer said not so fast. The City of Stockton owns a portion of that cost. We've had 2 meetings with City of Stockton. City of Stockton has indicated, well, we think you should pay for it because you thought you had to anyways. If we're going to use Measure L money for this, we've stated several times that we need hard documentation that it is the district's responsibility, or we can't use that bond money as part of the measure or as part of the McNair High School development. So I think that's been communicated. Another idea that we've floated to the City of Stockton is, this is rather a bizarre project. We're a school district. We do parking lots, buildings, water, electricity, play apparatuses, stadiums. We are not in the business of building water pumps. This particular water pump, as it's queued up now, would be built by Lodi Unified, seeking permits and permissions from the City of Stockton, only to cede ownership of the pump to the City of Stockton when complete. So we asked directly, City of Stockton, why don't you just build it? We've got enough bond projects going on right now. Since you're going to own it, they went, no, we don't want to do it. So the board, I believe, has seen the request for a 2x2 discussion on this. If the board would wish to move forward with that, it might be a beneficial conversation to this item. Okay. Yes, sir.
The Stockton, and that library is going to be built with a measure that they passed.
Yes, sir.
So I can't conceive that we should be responsible for that pump, since this is that measure, that money that's going to use for building that library is on that property.
Mr. Nav, I can assure you the board is responsible for at least a portion of it, and it's a majority of the cost. I wouldn't definitively say it's 70%, but I doubt it would be less than that. But I have still seen no documentation requiring that. We've seen a broad letter that was part of the master plan in City of Stockton that said all developers will improve the land effectively. So that logically makes sense, but still the expense of bond money, we're going to need something a little more solid than that. If it doesn't exist, then my counsel to superintendent board is there should be an agreement between the two agencies as to what's going to be covered, who's going to cover what in this. And I would still hope that City of Stockton would consider building it since it's their pump and we could contribute cost.
For the 2x2, Mr. Knapsack and I are on that committee, and get an agenda with the City of Stockton on this subject.
Okay. Thank you, sir.
Yes, sir.
Two questions. One is, if we pay for this pump, do we have to pay permit fees to the City of Stockton for
Yes.
the pump?
Our share of them.
So we pay the fees so they can own it.
Mhm.
Oh, that's a great, sweet deal for them. Second question is, can they build the library without that pump?
City of Stockton staff says no, that our pump is not sufficient to protect both our property and theirs.
I won't go any further. Thank you.
Mr. Nava?
Yeah, Ms. McFarland.
Once the pump is built, if Lodi Unified builds it, we cede ownership to City of Stockton and the board's out from under it forever. It'd be their asset, their cost. Yes, sir.
All right, Mr. Knapsack, any questions?
Well, I'm just kind of, this library, what advantage is it to Lodi Unified to have a library? I'm sure Marauder must have one.
You know, Gary, I'm a member of the Parks and Recreation Commission in Stockton, and that library may be used by McNair, but it's not for the McNair, the Lodi Unified School District usage. It's for the City of Stockton in that particular area.
Mr. Nava?
Yes, sir.
I can add one potential benefit to the library going in. Mr. Dawson and staff have been concerned for a long time of student foot traffic across Murata Lane, just south of the school. There is Caltrans money to fix things like that, like putting in a hard medium curb with a fence so that any pedestrian traffic would either have to use the crosswalk adjacent to West Lane or go further down on Murata and cross at the curb. If we were to fulfill Mr. Dawson and staff's wishes, we would pay for that. But with two agencies sharing that locale, Caltrans likes the joint application for funding to make pedestrian or foot traffic safer. So it may save us a lot of money. So that's the potential there.
Any other questions, Gary?
No, I don't think so. Not now.
Mr. Neely?
Thank you, Ms. Nava. Hey, if I could ask everybody, when you speak, if you'll unmute and we can hear. I know you can hear inside the room, but we can't hear on this side. Mr. Cobb, a little bit of background. Why is there a need for this pump? Is it because of something we did when we built McNair, or is it just a natural occurrence out there that that's the way the land was?
Well, I believe City of Stockton staff, when they state that it's required of any developer, the school district would have been the developer of the McNair site, to improve the land and the environment such that the building may exist there safely. So that's the backdrop, but according to district civil engineer, there are several other issues that predicated a shared cost between
Yeah.
City of Stockton and Lodi Unified.
Well, I got no problem with shared cost, but using their logic, and they're the developer of the library, they're responsible for taking care of that themselves. Right?
I think your civil engineer would agree with you, Mr. Neely.
Okay. Thank you. That's all I got. I say we fight this thing. This is ridiculous.
Thank you, George. Any public comments, Michelle, on this? I'm sorry, Mr. Porter.
Just a quick question, Mr. Khan. What is the
Sure.
status of our pump right now?
Well, it's older. It causes concern every year. Last year, the streets of McNair flooded because somebody came in and stole the copper wire out of it. And it took us about probably 4 hours to get new copper wire after the start of school. And it's not easy down there. Staff was out to wave cars off and they still drove into the water and their cars were ruined. So there are issues related to leaving that pump in place for a long period of time, I think.
Is it machinery that requires a lot of service in the present state?
Not in my experience. It gets checked regularly, but it hasn't really needed any fixing. But there would be a capacity issue with more buildings and hardscape, because hardscape can't perk. But so far, I don't want to say so far so good. That's
So you're saying it's in good status, though? It's in good status right now?
it is, yes, sir.
All right, thank you.
All right, Michelle, any public comments on this subject?
Michelle Orgon.
Put her on, please.
Thank you. We don't have any comments on this. We agree, I think, with Mr. Neely's comment that he made on that. Thank you.
All right, Mr. Khan, continue.
Okay, I can roll through the next items quickly. So the capital outlay fund, Fund 40, are a list of some of the projects here. The big item here is the board did table the, I'm not sure table is a correct term for the Campo Road kitchen. Staff still advises it's necessary. There are over 500 students at the site. Board does not have to make up its mind now, maybe a month from now, but sometime October-ish, if we are going to proceed with that project as a summer project, we would need board's action on that as well. So if there are any questions, I'll take those now.
Questions from the board?
Okay.
Nope.
Routine restricted maintenance, we mentioned this 8150 before. We're carrying reserves in the neighborhood of a couple $1 million there right now. Here's a breakdown of what it typically gets spent upon it. You'll notice we included the average price of a purchase order and an average for goods or supplies, and the average cost of a purchase order for services, and then the median as well. You'll notice there are a lot of small projects and inventory items that get paid out of this fund if there or this resource. If there are any questions, I'd be happy to take them. No? And then the last item is just an update. The board is now moving 2 portables from the old Needham site to Larson. It's taken us a little bit of while because these are not temporary moves. They are permanent moves to the Larson site, excuse me, to the Live Oak site too. And then 1 portable to the Larson site. That was one of the good portables left at Lodi High. So it wasn't destroyed. We moved it to the laydown yard at the M&O facility. And also the site or the on the board items, we included the toxic substances engineers responses to DTSC. I'm sure the board noticed these were not massively in-depth questions from DTSC. So it's just an indication that we are getting close to the final evaluation of that site. And if the board wishes, we can proceed with purchase negotiations. I'd be happy to answer any questions about that as well.
Any questions, board members? Any questions? No questions, Mr. Khan?
Okay. And then the final item tonight is, again, the 7 modernization projects. Where staff is here to request board participation in the initial discussions and the forward planning of these items. I typically on all the programming meetings we've had, I think 2 board members sit in. Certainly 3 would be welcome as well, but we would very much appreciate board participation in our discussion as we move forward on these items.
Okay, I know we have 2 board members, and I don't know who they are. Dr. Washer?
Yeah.
Mr. Who? Neely. Does any other board member would like to join that committee? I guess not, so we'll stay status quo.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, now,
Yes, sir.
if we have any questions from the public,
Michelle Oregon.
put her on, please.
No questions at this time. Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Khan?
Thank you, Mr. Nava, President Nava, members of the board, Dr. Washer. That concludes our presentation. We've, as you can see, been pretty busy, and it's with all the COVID and the in school, not in school, in school. It's been difficult to get this information in front of you. So staff and superintendent really appreciate the opportunity to inform.
Thank you very much, Leonard, for your hard work and your transparency on this report. I'm sure the board is benefited by it. And the next time we have another session like that, I'd like for you to follow the same procedure.
Thank you, sir.
Any questions from the Dr. Washer?
Thank you, Mr. President. I just want to acknowledge Mr. Khan and his staff. As you can tell, there's been a lot of exciting work going on, much needed work at our school sites. If you haven't seen the new M&O facility, I would encourage you to go out there and take a tour. It is quite phenomenal what's going on out in our new facility. So I would encourage you to do that. Thank you.
Dr. Washer, Mr. Beverly.
Thank you. I too want to thank Mr. Khan and his staff for putting this together. I've always thought that our Measure L and Measure U is really our step into the future, because these monies are going to set our facilities and help our students for years to come. It's really far reaching. And this information is, I think, really important for not only the board and the other staff members to know, but the public to know also. It's just, to me, it's so important to really set us up for the future. And I do appreciate your work. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Mr. Heberly. Now we will recess on our special meeting and go into closed session. Any public comments on closed session items?
Yes, we have one, Michelle Ordon.
They're on.
Thank you again, President Nava, members of the board. As you go into closed session, it has been a hurricane of a day for your teachers and students in this district. And as we look at on the closed session employee jobs, I assume that we're looking at administrative positions. I'd once again ask that stakeholders are included in the interview process going forward now that we're meeting. I would also ask your indulgence that with the things that have transpired today, distance learning with your teachers and students, that maybe during closed session, something can be done in order to address immediately the inappropriate things that teachers and students experienced in distance learning today, and that we set up a more direct communication with bargaining units and teachers when they bring forth things that are of a legal nature within things that happen in distance learning with students. I do appreciate Dr. Washer taking the phone call today and chatting a bit, but now we've had some legal referrals since last week, and I expect a whole bunch after yesterday and today. And today was horrific for your teachers. And so I would hope that we would have clear direction on what we can do tomorrow to prevent what happened today. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other public comments?
No further comments.
If not, then we'll adjourn to closed session. Thank you. Yes, mute yourself, boy. So are we on? Uh, We're on. Okay, we're back to our special meeting from closed session. There is nothing to report on closed session items. Thank you. Meeting is adjourned. Thank you.
Dr. Ross, do you have to like do a first and a second and all that to adjourn? No?